he went dutifully.
Yeah.
And he
Right.
says to Lucy, all shall be done, but it may be harder than you think.
Right.
And up to that moment, Lucy had been thinking how royal and strong and peaceful his face looked. Now it suddenly came into her head that he looked sad as well.
So back to The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Let's pick up at the next big question. What is the relationship between justice and mercy? Where do we see that in this text? This is probably...
It's a big question.
It's probably one of the bigger... I won't say the biggest question that we ask here, but it's one of the bigger questions for sure that we ask, because the whole story revolves around justice and mercy, because it's got characters who are unjust, characters who are just, and it's the justice at the end that resolves the whole thing. So where do we see justice and mercy throughout?
To overview it on a child's level, just
Yeah.
looking at it on a
Yeah.
child's level, we see justice because the witch is defeated.
Yes.
We see justice because Edmund gets his comeuppance, and
Yes.
he is taught a lesson.
But we also see mercy there.
And we see mercy because Aslan says to Peter, or Lucy, somebody, he says, there's no need to talk to him about any of this. What's past is past.
Yes.
And so and then of course there's the whole Aslan crucified, resurrected, and then the battle you all like so well. That battle scene.
That's right. All the boys are like, yeah, this is what I've been
everything
waiting
comes
for.
out
I like the
right.
battle too.
Everything comes out right. We
Yeah.
see mercy, but we also see justice.
Yeah.
The good wins, which is in most good children's literature. We don't really read a lot of literature where things don't come out okay and where justice isn't served.
That's right.
This one just is
It does take...
loaded with it because of the mercy.
Yeah. I mean, I think of later, maybe a Graham Greene novel down the road when they're much older. There is a moral complexity in novels that's often good,
Yes.
where things are left unjust because it brings something, if you feel it in your soul that something's not right. But for kids,
You really
you
don't want to
need
leave
justice.
them there.
You
Like,
need to have that satisfaction.
I think about the bronze bow.
Yes.
And he's justified in his anger
Yes.
that the Romans crucified his father. What child would not just be devastated by that and
Yes.
full of hate? But the fact that at the end he comes back, that he listens to Jesus,
Yeah.
and that he then is able to forgive and actually ends up with some kind of, I don't know that it would be that it's love
Yeah.
for who he considers his enemy, but he's at least on the road to that.
That's right.
And so that's really where we want this literature to end for children,
Right.
is to know that in the end, anger and revenge will be damaging. And we see it through
Achilles. I mean,
Achilles,
Yes.
the Count of Monte Cristo,
Yes.
Tale of Two Cities. It's a huge theme, and Lewis has been able really to perfectly deal with justice and mercy in a way that is totally understandable for young children, and on a level where they don't have to by the time they get to the bronze bow, they're ready and able. But this is really for those 4th, 5th grade students, it's the perfect example.
Well, I think a lot of how we can talk about it maybe is in the terms of like fairness and unfairness, injustice and justice being somewhat related to those ideas. Because to get into some of the details of the novel now, I mean, there you see a fairness and an unfairness throughout. You see Edmund kind of wishing he were in Peter's position and feeling sometimes the injustice of that. Sometimes he's not treated, even because, he's being mean to Lucy and ought not to be treated very well. Even so, sometimes he's treated more harshly than maybe he should be by Peter and
Well, as you
Susan.
would, yes, younger
Right.
brothers are by
Yeah,
their
that's
older
right.
brothers.
That's right. So all of them are struggling with this kind of injustice towards each other. I mean, even Lucy, who's this beautiful, uplifted, full of light character throughout, she even calls Edmund a beast. Or she uses language that isn't kind and things like that throughout the novel. So you see these interplays of justice and justice, fairness and unfairness to each other. You see a lot of the injustice in the witch. I mean, if we're talking about justice and mercy, sometimes it's helpful to clarify what we mean by justice by using the foil. And she's
Right.
constantly doing unjust things. She comes across the party in the woods as Aslan is on the move, and they're eating a breakfast given to them by Father Christmas. And
The animals.
the animals, and she just doesn't want to hear them. She doesn't want to hear them tell the truth. This was from Father Christmas. She's asking them where it came from, and they're telling her, and she doesn't want to believe it, so she turns them all into stone. I mean, it's totally unjust. It's the inappropriate reaction to the truth.
It is, but Edmund has
That's
been
right.
on her side
That's right.
until then, and then
Right.
he sees
The
and
injustice.
recognizes the injustice of it. And
Well-
at that point, he starts to become human again.
That's right. He really does.
Right.
He really does. And I think Edmund is the character where, of course, we see this all come together. Isaiah says of the cross, it's where it's where justice and mercy, love and mercy meet. And you're seeing that in the character of Edmund. He's the one who has been unjust towards his brothers and sisters, has also received injustice from them. But he's the one that becomes dehumanized by the injustice of the witch. And yet it is the just action of Aslan, who does allow that there is a justice in a traitor dying for his betrayal. That is just. That is part of the deep magic. It's written in, it's encoded in by the Emperor beyond the sea. But what the witch forgets is mercy. And I think that's what Aslan is saying, is that the deeper magic is where mercy and justice meet. And it's in the experience of Aslan dying on behalf of Edmund, for Edmund. And then because of that mercy interacting with justice, we see the magic of the table is broken. And by magic, things are restored and come back to life. It's Edmund at the end who, when given the name, when having become a king, he's the one now that is called Edmund the Just. Not Peter. Peter's the Magnificent.
Right.
But it's Edmund the Just. And I think that's totally due to the fact that he's the one where justice and mercy meet, finally, throughout the story.
And he's the one that ultimately defeats the White Witch.
That's right.
Right. And so he, he's the one that, Aslan doesn't really know exactly what's happened. I mean, presumably in the story, it seems like Peter's explaining to Aslan, and Peter says, well, it was Edmund. He's the one that cut the witch's wand. He thought to cut the wand and to cut her off from her magic instead of going directly for her.
That's right.
And so, Peter in that sense is, quite humble and gives credit where credit is due.
That's right. He's just.
That's right.
In his
That's exactly
estimation
right.
of
And
Edmund.
it's the perfect, it's the perfect success for Edmund, because it's in that moment that he, sort of comes back around and he sort of regains himself, defeating the witch.
That's right. There is a sense in which throughout the novel, justice is right action towards those who do it. And there is a sense in which the witch ought to be defeated. And it's through Edmund that she is. So again, justice through Edmund, the unjust one. It's a beautiful kind of reversal of fortune, if you will.
And then they are all given their titles as kings and queens, of Narnia, which is beautiful. And I love the back page where it sort of calls, it sort of identifies what they do as kings and queens of Narnia. Which again, you can see that you can see those values in just the way that they are setting up their world. And they made good laws. They kept the peace. They saved the good trees. They stopped the busybodies and the interferers. And so you can see that they, from their own goodness, they are exuding goodness into the land and sort of spreading that, as noble, kings and queens.
Right. Because they have experienced true justice and true mercy, now their actions are just and merciful. And it spreads. It spreads from them. So we've been talking about justice and mercy, and that really, I think, culminates in love here. So our last question for this book is, what is genuine love? And now I know before we kind of talk about that, we've been discussing this before, and we kind of see here love constantly in the context of sacrifice, a self-sacrificial love. Where do we see that?
Really, that should have been it. Sacrificial love should have been.
Right. Well, we see that initially with Tumnus. I think that Tumnus, recognizes that he needs to tell Lucy the truth, and he is concerned about her safety, and he changes his mind on the decision to kidnap her and give her over to the witch, and so he surely recognizes the danger that puts him in order to do that, but he's willing to make that sacrifice for Lucy in that situation. And I think that's the first instance. And I think it's nice that we see the entire episode, because we see that the reason that he even takes her in the first place is that he's afraid of the witch. I mean, this is all fear driven. It's not,
That's right.
It's probably not his authentic character, but the circumstances and the fear have, caused him to do something. And then he has the strength to make that sacrifice and put himself at risk.
That's right.
Instead of being self-protective, he is self-sacrificial.
And he does, and he is sacrificed. He is turned to stone.
He truly is. And you leave with a sense of, well, maybe he'll be okay, because he thinks he gets Lucy back.
He could possibly get away.
But then we know, I mean, that makes that scene so powerful when we come to the cave and it's
there he
destroyed and it's gone. And so we know that something terrible is happening to him.
Right.
And I think that same kind of self-sacrificial love is displayed in a lot of the true Narnians throughout.
Right.
I mean, we get that with the beavers.
Right.
The beavers are willing to risk themselves for the sake of the children, because they know that these are the children they've been waiting for.
Right.
They've been waiting for the prophecies that have been spoken to be recognized and fulfilled in them.
Right.
Where else do we see this self-sacrificial love?
I think just broadly, I think we see it in the spirit of adventure in all of the Narnians, and really in all of the Chronicles of Narnia. I mean, this sort of affection for adventure and this willingness to endure. What accompanies adventure? I mean, the physical discomforts, the uncertainties, all of these things. We see this throughout all of Narnia, that, the beavers are willing to, to go out into the cold, and the children are willing to go through a wardrobe, and they don't know what's on the other side. And, I think that we can see sort of this, embedded in the spirit of adventure. And when Lewis points out to us that the adventure is good, and that that these adventures end in, successes and triumphs and in good things, I think that just in a meta way, we can kind of see.
Sure.
Because all of their adventures are leading to something that needs to be done.
Right. Right.
Kind of like when, Gandalf that tells Bilbo, that because Bilbo just loves to be in his home.
Right.
And Gandalf says, you've got to go.
That's right.
There's this journey awaiting you. And it's really the same.
It is.
Like it's not just adventure for the sake of adventure. It's actually accomplishing something.
And it's a calling. I mean, I think that's exactly
calling,
right.
yes.
I mean, Bilbo wants to be in his comfortable hobbit hole, but he is called to do something bigger and better that he doesn't even know he's capable of doing. And, I think that's one of the great things we talk about in The Wind and the Willows, is the difference between a reckless, selfish adventure, which we see Toad undertake often.
That's right, because of his love for motor cars.
That's just like this wild ride that, Toad is always after, whereas his friends are always also on a crazy adventure, but it's always the sacrificial adventure to save him.
That's right. Because of their love for him.
Right, and their friendship. And so, I think just kind of thinking about the adventures that the children are going on and all of the characters, and, is this leading to something good, or is this leading to something destructive?
Yeah. Well, I think the most obvious and powerful example in this of this genuine love is, of course, the sacrifice of Aslan. He's the only one. Something we haven't really brought up, and we should have at times, is how none of the children were able to save Edmund. And the beavers tell them explicitly that you can't do anything. You need Aslan to do it for you. It's because of their love for Edmund that they're wanting to save him. They can't just leave him alone, even though he's been nasty to them. They still love him as a brother. But it requires giving up their ability to do anything in favor of Aslan's ability to do something, because it's only Aslan who really has the status, the character, the nature, the genuine love that's required to
But
sacrifice himself.
You see the struggle too in
Yeah.
Aslan. I thought Lewis did a
Yes.
fine job with that too. He didn't go happily.
There's a sorrow.
He went dutifully.
Yeah.
And he
Right.
says to Lucy, all shall be done, but it may be harder than you think.
Right.
Mhm.
And up to that moment, Lucy had been thinking how royal and strong and peaceful his face looked. Now it suddenly came into her head that he looked sad as well.
When I think, like, how did
It's like the Garden
yes,
of Gethsemane.
yeah.
It's the same.
This is genuine love.
That's
It's
right.
that you
I'm
lay down your
doing
life
it.
for
It's
your
not
friend.
going to be fun.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd rather not do it, but I will do my duty.
Love compels me.
Love
to do this.
compels me. Yeah.